Hello, this is Chris McCormack with Clayton-Biltmore Financial, and I want to thank you for taking the time today to learn some more about estate planning. What is estate planning? We have partnered with a company called Legacy Lock, which is really taking estate planning to new levels because most people, as you know, you go online, you pay a couple $100, you can do a will for yourself, but that's just a will. For those folks who go out and seek out a lawyer, they're looking to spend anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 to get their documents done. Why is this important? Well, I'll tell you this. This is a very near and dear thing to me. I had to live through this 5 years ago when my father passed away. What are estate plan documents? Most people have a will. I say most people have a will. Most of you have heard of a will, whether you have an up-to-date will, whether you know about it, or whether you have one. Really, only about 50% of you do that. Why do you need these documents, though? Here's what I lived through personally 5.5 years ago. My father passed away, massive heart attack. My mother subsequently found him, and she had a stress-induced heart attack. I live 9 hours away, and I'm getting a phone call that, hey, your mother's in the hospital and your father has passed away. Trying to plan a funeral, trying to take care of a mother in the hospital from 9 hours away while you're trying to expedite yourself back to Kentucky, I learned firsthand that simply having a will was not enough. Because when you need to pay for your funeral, when you need to pay for expenses and do other things, and you don't have access to the funds, and you don't have access to accounts, you don't know where documents are. I'll never forget the day I was in a closet digging through a safe, texting somebody standing next to my mother in the hospital saying, I found this. Is this what I'm supposed to be looking for? Why do you need these documents? Why does your family need to know where they're at? Well, I just alluded to the fact, financial costs. It was a very expensive hurdle jumping through things. I can proudly stand here today and tell you, after getting through that, within 6 months of my father passing away, my mother and my two brothers, we sat down and we implemented everything I'm going to talk with you about today. We have wills, we have living trust set up, there's power of attorneys. I know who her advisors are. I know where the stuff is supposed to go. I know what the banks are. These are not hard things to do, but they're scary things to do because it makes you talk about death. And nobody wants to think. We all know we're going to end. We just don't want to think about it or talk about it. But having a plan and having that stuff in place when it does happen is going to save you, first and foremost, the financial costs. Any idea how expensive it can be? Without an estate plan, some of the fees that you're going to end up filing. You got filing fees. They vary state to state. Go figure that California and Florida are really expensive. Then you have legal notice fees, bond fees, personal representative fees, and attorney's fees. So without a plan in place, when my father passed, we had to go through litigation, had to go to court, had to do things to figure out where stuff was supposed to go. Today, I mean, it's sad to think about, but when my mother passes, I don't have to deal with the courts. We know where everything is going. We know who gets the house. We know where the life insurance is. We know which accounts are what. It's all taken care of. We have mitigated all these costs. Do you have a plan in place today to mitigate the costs? Or is the nest egg that you saved up, that you think you're leaving to your heirs, going to be obliterated to pay these fees? That's the financial aspect. What's the personal cost of not having a plan in place? When my grandfather passed away, he had 6 children. Before he passed away, we used to gather every Christmas and every Thanksgiving for family get-togethers. When he passed away, those family get-togethers ceased. Do you know why? They ceased because his youngest child moved into his house 6 months before he passed away and exhausted everything that was there. So when he passed away, what the siblings thought was going on with the family didn't happen. People lost stuff. They lost their childhood home. It was just a complete mess. These are the personal costs. So that again, you've got financial costs and you've got personal costs. You know, when I was in the military, they always say you either fail to plan or you plan to fail. So if you fail to plan, you fail to put a healthy, robust, fully encompassed estate plan in place, then that means you plan to fail for your family when the time comes that they need to deal with your estate. I will tell you right now, here in the state of Virginia, probate, because of COVID, everybody's familiar with COVID from 3 years ago, COVID has actually backed us up. Right now, it's 16 to 18 months in the state of Virginia from the time you pass to it's going to go through probate, if you got to go through probate. That means 16 to 18 months of not knowing what's going to happen with your family home, what's going to happen with the expenses, because you didn't have a plan in place. So, do you have a will? Do you have a fully robust estate plan? And what all is estate plan going to do for you? These are some basic statistics kind of throw out there for you. As we talked about, 50% of Americans don't have a will. So 1 out of 2 of you listening to this webinar today do not have a will. But as I'm going to show you over the next few minutes, a will is not enough. That's just part of the puzzle. We're talking about a fully robust estate plan. 67% of Americans don't have that. If you want your family protected, you've got to have a plan in place. Why don't people do this? I already talked about the big one, the factor that people don't like talking about death. Some things that, scare people. We're going to work through these today. The intimidating process. You don't know. You don't know what you don't know. You're not an expert in this. Well, that's why it's important to find someone that you trust, to find someone that's going to work with you, to find someone that wants to set up a customizable personal estate plan for you. Second thing is the attorney costs. As I said, for a few $100, you can go online and think that you've got a great will in place. But a couple things about that. You just gave all of your data to somebody that you don't know for $300. And you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know if you did the right thing. You don't know if all your questions were answered. And you have a will. A will is only about 20% of estate plan. We've talked about the uncomfortable aspect of it. Nobody wants to think about death. But unfortunately, it's coming. Complicated. You don't have to be the expert, but you need to find somebody that's willing to listen to you, to give you the customized plan that's going to work for you. And then procrastination. I love talking to folks in their 20s and 30s, and they're fine. They don't have to worry about it. But you are a slip or fall away from being health-wise injured for the rest of your life. You're 2 seconds away while driving down the road of being handicapped or worst case, killed in a car accident. So procrastination, nobody knows when their end time is. And if anybody listening to this today can tell me the day they're going to die, please reach out to me after this, because I want to know how you come up with that information. Because I was not ready the day I received a phone call, let alone that my father had passed, but let alone that my mother was in the hospital with a heart attack. At the end of the day, you've got a choice to make. Because, as we've said, the day is going to come where your estate is going to be settled. You can do it your way, or you can do it the way the court wants to do it. You know, we look around today and we look at where the economy is, we look at what's going on in the government. Do you really want somebody else meddling in your affairs that doesn't know you, that doesn't know your family, that doesn't know what's important to you? Or do you want a customized plan set aside that you're aware of, it meets your wishes, and you know your children, your nieces, your nephews, your brothers, your sisters, everybody knows this is how you wanted things taken care of? You have the choice today. Which choice are you going to make? Questions to think about why this estate plan needs to be put together. First thing is your assets. I don't care if you've only got $1,000 in a checking account. That's an asset. You also have a house. Most people have a home. I mean, some people, maybe they're renting, but you have belongings. Maybe you've got that china cabinet that was handed down from 3 generations back that you want to make sure goes to somebody. You have assets, whether you realize it or not, that need to be identified. Healthcare. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys on here remember, but it was in 1994, 1996, the young 26-year-old girl who fell and hurt herself and was in a coma. And then there became a legal battle of how long do you let her be in a coma? Or maybe you're dealing with somebody who's going through dementia and you're and you're not ready to let go and you're trying to prolong their life. But maybe they, when they were in a good state of mind, could have told you, hey, don't make this any more painful than it needs to be. And then your family's future. What is your family's future? Have you left a legacy for your family? These are questions that you need to sit down and talk about with your significant other, with your children, you know, those people that are important to you, because it's going to affect them while you're going through this as well as when you're gone. I told you got 2 choices, your plan or the court's plan. We've already talked about the cost. If you don't put a plan in place, the courts not only are going to give the plan that they want, but they're going to make you pay for it from the grave. No estate plan equals probate. Somebody is going to decide what to do with your stuff. It's you or the courts. Your assets are going to go to court. Then whatever is left after all the fees come out that we've talked about. Now, so you've got fees. What have we talked about? Time. Here in Virginia, 16 to 18 months. Other places in the country, it just varies with what's going on. One thing I want to add, talking about the courts here, that people don't realize is you can go online right now and look up everything that's gone through probate court. It's public record. You know, people today with the internet and things that are out there, they're worried about scammers. Well, one way scammers go after people is they go and they pull up court records and they find out, hey, this person is hurting. This person just lost something. Maybe this person needs some help that I can get, even though you're not actually giving them help. Do you want who owns your car, who has this piece of property, who does these other things, the legal battles that go on amongst your heirs to be a matter of public record? Or do you want everything protected and staying close to family? Typical probate costs. Costs are roughly anywhere from 1% to 8%. California being the most expensive, we're used to seeing that. So you got fees up front, you got court fees, you got signing fees. Your assets have dwindled to nothing because you're paying all these expenses that you weren't ready for. Benefits of avoiding probate. We just talked about the fees, the cost. Do you want your assets to go to your heirs? Do you want your assets to go to the courts? We've talked about the time aspect. 16 to 18 months on average, when time returns to normal, to go back to the 6 to 8. But right now, your family would be sitting around for a year and a half waiting for a docket to be called to know what was going to happen with your assets. Stress. What is the focus when you pass? Here I was trying to figure out how to pay for, and I mean, my father had been dead for 40 hours when he was found. So there was a lot of stuff that needed to be cleaned up. There was a lot of extra expenses that I was not prepared for. That's stressful enough. At the same time, I'm dealing with the stress of, when does my mother get out of the hospital? What kind of care does she need? What's going on with that? Did I want the added stress of, oh, I got to go find a lawyer. Oh, I've got to haggle with my two brothers about what's going to happen this. Who's going to get the house? Who's going to do this? Get that stress out. Make sure that your family, the significant others to you, your heirs, don't have to deal with that stress. They can focus on remembering you. They can focus on taking care of your legacy and then celebrating the life that you had. Paperwork. Does everybody like paperwork? Everybody always talks about filing taxes and tax season. Nobody wants to have extra paperwork. And as I talked about with the probate and the public record aspect, do you want scammers to get your personal information and know that you just went through a trying time and seek you out and try to prey on your family? Or do you want your information kept close to home, your family able to celebrate you and move on? So we talked about a will. And we talked about a will is basically 20% of an estate plan. How many of you out here today have a living trust? What does a living trust do? I told you I now have a living trust along with the will and these other documents we're going to talk about. That living trust cuts probate out of the equation. Because with your assets and a living trust, now, as soon as something happens to you, because you have a living trust in place, you have already given, you still own the accounts, the assets, but it's in the trust name, and there's other members of the trust. So now that the owner is gone, the trust takes over those assets. And the members that you have allowed into that trust now can get those assets. You just took care of probate court. You just took care of your stuff having to be public record. You have put a contract in place while you're alive that's going to avoid the costs, the fees, the public record, the time of waiting until a judge can look at your file. And as we said, it's your choice. Do you make a choice today to put a plan in place, or are you going to wait and let the court decide your family's future? Who goes into the trust? Who has access to your assets when they receive them? Do you have young children? Do you want them to only have access to stuff incrementally? Do you want them to get money only to go to college? Spell these things out. These things you control. If you don't spell it out, guess who's going to make the decision? The courts are. How they get them. Who makes the decisions? This we're going to talk about in just a minute from the health aspect. While you're alive, who controls your financial assets and your health aspects? I want to talk about this for who manages for minors. Another thing about this is recognize these documents are not one-time documents. I recently worked with somebody who filled out a will 10 years ago, And he realized today that since then he's been divorced, he's changed a job, and he has his two children are adults now. They're no longer minors. And we were having the conversation. He goes, I really need to update this. He said, but I don't want to go pay a lawyer another $3,000 to update this because that's what it's going to take. These are not one-time documents. These are documents that every single year you need to revisit. Have your children aged? Have you divorced? Have you moved? Have you sold something? You decide. What is a revocable living trust? This is what we want. We want a revocable living trust. This is one that you control while you're alive. And it really creates an entire new umbrella over your assets. As I said, you're still the owner. Your name is still on stuff. You have control of it. But in the event of your demise, because it's in the trust, now you have given access to your stuff to the trust. We're looking at a trust to get rid of probate. You own it. You control it. And then last but not least, why? So you don't have to rely on the courts. You specify what happens after you pass away. We talked about the who goes into it, the when does the money get dispersed, how does it get dispersed, the timeline. You want a revocable living trust. A will is not sufficient. How many people of those of you who have a will, do you 100% know every asset you have is spelled out in that will? Probably not, especially if it's 10 years old. Revocable and changeable. Keyword there, revocable. You maintain control. Then you have what's called an irrevocable living trust. Don't really recommend this for most folks because what happens here, you put a trust in place. Now, it can't be changed unless the members of the trust allow it to be changed. There's a few times where this is a good, the biggest one is, if you're setting up a trust and your focus is from a tax standpoint. Because there are tax shelter benefits by doing irrevocable living trusts. I know some folks use this for charities because they want the charity to own it. It can be helpful, but for the mass majority of folks, you want a revocable living trust. If we want to talk tax, be happy to discuss that with you at a later date. We can see if an irrevocable is beneficial to you, but most people, revocable is what you want. Just mention here briefly the Secure Act. Secure Act came out in 2020. It really has changed the financial field as far as how IRAs are inherited. The stretch IRA no longer exists. There's a lot of laws and things that have changed there. So again, there's two kinds, revocable, irrevocable. Most folks are going to recommend doing revocable. But at the end of the day, you need a living trust. You need all your assets spelled out. You need it identified. If I'd had a living trust 5 years ago, I would not have been texting someone standing next to my mother in a hospital bed trying to figure out how to access funds to take care of things, or waiting for a death certificate to be printed off so I could file it with the life insurance company to get the $25,000 whole life policy that was going to, the list goes on and on and on. These are things we don't think about because they're hard to think that, oh, the person I love might actually pass away. You need a trust in place. So we've talked about a comprehensive estate plan. As I said, most people say, hey, I've got a will, I'm good to go. But a truly fully engrossed comprehensive estate plan, you've got a revocable living trust, you've got your will, you've got the powers of attorney, and then you have advanced medical directives. We've talked about the living trust. Now what I want to talk about is the powers of attorney. I told you with my mother's situation, I know who has power of attorney. And there's two separate types of power of attorney. Many of you may have already used power of attorney for different things. I know when I was in the military, I bought a house 3 states away. I signed a simple power of attorney form so that the real estate broker could act on my behalf to sign the on closing date because I wasn't going to fly 3 states away to close on the house at the time. Same type of thing here. You've got a financial power of attorney, and you're going to have what's called your healthcare power of attorney. And then last but not least, we'll talk about your state medical directives. This is a fully comprehensive estate plan. Because what are we trying to do? We're trying to save cost. We're trying to keep our records private. And we're trying to stay out of that nasty probate court where we have to wait for the wonderful judge, we have no idea who he is, to tell our family what they're going to get, and then turn around and pay the judge for him telling my family what they got. Last will and testament. It's often called a pour-over will. As I said, many of you are familiar with this. Only half of you, though, may have one. But I hope you've learned as we've gone through it so far, that's not sufficient. It's not going to protect your family. It needs to be in conjunction with that trust. I can't say it enough. A last will and testament is insufficient to protect your family. You're going to end up in court if that's all you have. Powers of attorney. We talked about 2 types. As I said here, you've got financial power of attorney and you've got your healthcare power of attorney. What does durable mean? Durable means that they're going to be there even after your incapacitation. That is key because, I told you the example, I had a power of attorney to sign my mortgage, close on a house. That was because I still had to receive a phone call and confirm it. If I was incapacitated, that person did not have full power of attorney. Durable power of attorney is giving them the power to act on your behalf if you are incapable of doing anything. Financial power of attorney. It's giving them the power to make the basic financial decisions of things that you've not put in the trust yet, or things that, maybe you forgot about. But somebody has the ability to access that stuff. With that revocable living trust, as we've talked about, you don't have to worry about the power of attorney because you put the stuff in the trust, you're the owner, but other people have access and they have the authority because it's in a trust, as long as they're a listed trustee. Maybe you've got a significant financial decision to make because you need to figure out how you're going to pay for some expensive health care. Or maybe you have dementia and you're unable to make the cognitive thought for yourself, and they're trying to figure out, do we do hospice? Do we do this? How do we fund this? You need somebody in place who has the ability and the power to make these decisions. Again, just as I said, you revisit the will every year, you revisit the trust every year. Who are the members of the trust? You revisit the power of attorney every single year because you are giving someone power to speak on your behalf when it comes to your finances. That is a very, very big responsibility to carry because you know how hard it is to be responsible for yourself when you're actually now giving the responsibility of your financial life to another person. Make sure it's somebody that you trust. Make sure you revisit it. Don't let this stuff sit there for years and years and years and then be surprised. Healthcare power of attorney. We talked about the young lady that was injured at 26 years old. If she'd had a power of attorney for health care, her family would not have had to have gone to court 12 years later and turned into the national news story that it was. I don't know about you. I mean, the longest recorded history of somebody coming out of a coma was 29 years. They came out of that coma and almost 3 decades had passed by. They weren't the same person. They never really recovered. Maybe you want to be left in a coma for 29 years. I don't know. Maybe you want to say, hey, leave me in a coma for 10 years. After 10 years, pull the plug. But if you don't have somebody in place, you haven't spelled these things out, your family is going to be sitting there arguing, fighting, trying to make the decisions for you. And that's why I say that last thing. They have the ability to terminate, because just like the financial responsibility of your life, you've given this person the responsibility of the health of your life. So how do they know what to do with this power that you've given them? This is where the living will and advanced directives comes in. We talked about 4 things, right? We talked about your trust. We talked about your will. We talked about the power of attorney. And how do they know what to do? Because while you're in a cognitive state, alive and able, you spell these things out. You tell them what you want to do. I hope by now you've figured out the answer to this question. You really think a last will and testament is enough? Do you think that's going to be the end all be all and it's going to capture everything that needs to happen to protect your family and your heirs and your assets when something happens to you? That living will is just a wish document. And I hope you've learned here today as we've gone through this that without the full encompassing estate plan in place, that will is going to go to probate court. And the judge is going to, generally speaking, the judge is going to speak on behalf of what the will says and engage those. But if you haven't spelled everything out, if you haven't identified, the rest is going to be left to the judgment of the court. You need a full encompassing estate plan. How do we get there? You know, I told you when we came in here, we've partnered with a company called Legacy Lock, and it's really been a huge, positive impact on families, because up until this point, you basically had 2 options. You could send somebody online to, wills.com. They pay a couple $100, they do a will. But as we've talked through here today, a will is not enough. Or they go to that lawyer, they spend several $1,000s. Solution we have for you today to put a full entire estate plan in place is we've partnered with a law firm. So they actually build the documents. And then we as a guide will walk you through this system. Because right now, if you go and you pay $300, you're at the mercy of choose your adventure. You don't have somebody walking you through. You don't have the expert guiding you and asking the questions. You're trying to decipher what the internet has for you. I told you a few minutes ago about an individual I recently spoke with who took out a will 10 years ago, and he's got a very good lawyer. But here's what he did. He didn't go find a lawyer who was experienced in estate planning. He went to his regular lawyer. And so what happened is, just because they have lawyer beside their name doesn't mean that, they may not be real savvy in tax law. This guy wasn't real savvy in estate law. He may have been real good for business, or he may be a really good defense attorney. But just because they have lawyer doesn't mean they know everything. And this particular lawyer that this guy had gone to, guess what? He had no idea how to do trusts. He could write a great will, but he had no idea how to do trusts. So he wrote the paperwork and handed it to this guy. And for 10 years, this guy has had paperwork and no trust actually set up. This is a fully complete, customized estate plan portfolio. You're going to get the will. You're going to get the trust documentation. You're going to get the guidance and the instruction of actually how to fund those trusts. So you're not like the guy who 10 years ago was handed some paperwork and had no idea what to do with it. I hope by this point, again, you've realized the value of a fully funded estate plan portfolio. Customized for you as an individual. You got the $300 version online. It's about as customized as what you know. We already talked about one of the reasons that people don't do this is because they don't know. So if you don't know today, how do you expect to figure it out when you pay $300? When you do this, a couple things we're going to do. First off, I'm going to tell you, getting your fully estate plan done by using Legacy Lock is very affordable. It's a little bit more expensive than the $300 version online, but it's a whole lot cheaper than the attorney. And that's assuming you find the right attorney. Like I said, not every lawyer, just because they have lawyer in front of their name, means that they know how to do wills and trusts. The next thing is what I've alluded to here. We have to go through a certification to be trusted advisors because we're trained on this and we know how to ask the right questions. We know how to fill this information out, and we are vetted. So unlike when you go online and you look that lawyer up, if talking to somebody here, we're going to guide you through the process. We are a financial firm. We understand the X's and O's and how this works. Every single step, we're right here beside you, filling this out, building your customized portfolio. The other component here is this. Talk to you, one of the reasons people don't do this, they procrastinate. It doesn't take 6 months to do this. Through a few simple meetings and consultations, we can sit down, we can go through the book, we can get all of your questions. As you see here, you've got an interview, and then you build the documents that are customized for you. Maybe you need more than somebody else, but the thing is it's customized to you, and you're saving the cost. Because right now, if you go talk to the lawyer and you need to revisit with the lawyer, guess what? They're going to bill you 15-minute increments. We are able to do the work for you without you being billed every 15 minutes. It's done quicker, it's done smoother, and you have a personal liaison walking you through and guiding you along the way. You're also going to get, as you see, part of the portfolio, the power of attorney we talked about. All the components of that estate plan are part of the Legacy Lock component: the will, the trust, and the powers of attorneys, and your directive. You know, a lot of folks, they're worried about where their documents are at. I'm originally from Kentucky, telling you growing up in Kentucky. And if anybody remembers what happened a year ago when the tornado blew through, maybe you live in the Gulf Coast and you have hurricanes come through. I personally know people whose documents were stored in a safe in a closet, and they've never seen them documents because something happened and they disappeared in a natural disaster. This is a way to have electronic, stored, secure documents. I wouldn't have been in a closet digging through a safe looking for paperwork if my mother had have had paperwork online where I could have quickly accessed and had everything in one nice, neat portfolio. Everything is going to be in a secure place that you and those people you allow have 24/7 access to everything. Do you want everything in one nice, simple place, or do you want somebody digging through a closet or looking through that old drawer behind the china cabinet for the secret safe in the wall? I don't know. I don't know your story. But I know this is very important, and it's been a very personal and powerful life story that I've lived through myself. We talked about a trust. As I said, part of this portfolio is funding that trust. So we're going to go through the process. We're going to do the interview. We're going to figure out, what blocks are customizable for you. And then, unlike the guy who went to the lawyer and was handed some paperwork, we're actually going to show you how to fund the trust step by step. Not just going to throw you to the wolves and say, figure it out, but you're actually going to get a funding kit, which is going to walk you through generating the documents for how to fund each trust that you need. You see many examples here: insurance, your IRAs, pensions, cash accounts, vehicles. All this stuff needs to be identified in the trust. Again, Legacy Lock is licensed in all 50 states. This is not something that is specific to Virginia. I know I'm here in Virginia. I've talked about that. But we can cover anybody, anywhere. Fully customizable. Every document's done. Guided walkthrough. You're not thrown to the wolves in this process. A fully customizable estate plan. So where are you at from what we've heard today? What's the next step? Do you have a fully functional estate plan ready to protect your family, to keep them out of court, to save the costs, and to minimize the stress when something happens? At the end of this, I've got a survey. If you please fill out the survey, leave any notes. If you want to take the next step, as I said, basically it's to set up a call with me. So what's going to happen is you fill out the survey, put that you would request a call back. We'll reach out to you, schedule a 15 to 20-minute appointment just to simply do a consultation and go over, how we can help you. I hope by the end of this, looking at this, that you realize if you don't have a fully functional estate plan in place, you need to take action because your family is exposed to risk of cost, they're exposed to risk of privacy, they're exposed to risk of time, and we talked about it briefly, but they're also exposed to the emotional aspect of family separating. So I want to thank you for being here today. Click on the link at the bottom and look forward to hearing from you. Again, my name is Chris McCormack, and thank you very much for your time.
So we know the goal is to have a stress-free financial retirement, but what are the first steps? Well, the first step is you got to get your financial house in order. One of the tools we use is Asset Map. You'll see on the screen what an asset map looks like. Basically, what it is a one-pager that lists out all your financial resources. So it tells you where you stand at any one particular point of time so you can address things that need attention. For example, do you have a 401k you haven't looked at in years? Do you have a lot of cash sitting around that you want to put to work? Are you diversified so not all your eggs are all in one basket? So you want to manage the process, and this is the first step. The good thing about filling out Asset Map is it's not invasive with asking you for account numbers or anything like that, and it's not time consuming. Like I said, it gives you a snapshot of where you are in regards to retirement planning, and then one of the retirement specialists at Clayton-Biltmore can provide recommendations on the steps you need to take to achieve a stress-free financial retirement. And it's all done in an easy to understand format. The process isn't complicated, it's just very thorough. Now, let me just say this. If anyone's trying to overwhelm you with complex multiple page reports you don't understand, then you're in the wrong place. You should have an easy to understand retirement plan, knowing where your money is, where it's invested, and what you're trying to achieve. So talk to one of the retirement specialists at Clayton-Biltmore to see how you can achieve a stress-free financial retirement. To paraphrase the Geico commercial, 15 minutes can give you a stress-free financial retirement. So please reach out to us if we can help. Thanks so much.